All right. Hi there. I'm Matt, CEO and co-founder of Structure Climate, based here in Minneapolis, so happy to have you all here. I was an Army veteran a lifetime ago. Well, I guess I'm an Army veteran, was in the Army. Was at Cargill for a number of years, worked in energy tech, and launched Structure Climate last year with the goal of just getting more stuff done. And one of the things I love about this particular corner of the industry is that there's so many opportunities to do things, strong bias for action here, and so excited to share more about what we're doing. All right, so this is what we do. And there's a little more to it than this, but this is basically it. So what do we mean when we say climate? What we do at Structure Climate is we look at the entire impact spectrum of what our clients do. And if they are doing something that provides direct, significant, and public benefit, we can access much lower cost capital for them. And often that can make a really big difference. All right, so when we say projects, what do we mean? Something where there's a customer. What is the customer buying? You tell us. Could be carbon removal, could be biomass, could be waste disposal services, tipping fees. The point is that there are lots of what are essentially fairly anodyne cash flows being generated around business operations moving physical material like you all are quite familiar with. So we don't care if it's additional. Other people might care if it's additional. We don't care if there are co-benefits. Other people might care if there are co-benefits. We are not here to say that one product is better or worse than others. We're here to say that if you have a buyer that represents cash flows related to operations that you have an opportunity to execute, then let's talk. Okay, so when we say finance, what do we mean? You have costs now and you have revenues later. Where we sometimes see the biggest gap is when it's all costs now and no revenues later. So the revenues later is a key piece, but again, we're flexible on what they're buying. Anyone from commercial real estate or renewable energy backgrounds? Raise your hands a little bit. So projects in many physical asset industries are essentially firewalled risks. So this building, for instance, I'm sure is its own project, maybe multiple projects. But the idea being that you can finance something based just on what is happening at the level of the something. It's a little abstracted, but would love to get into it more. And then, again, who's your buyer? So cost now, yes, those are clear. What are the revenues later? What are they buying? Have they bought it before? And so on. All right, loans, project finance loans. We only do loans. We don't do equity. And the reason is that we're not the earliest capital movers. So again, cost now, revenues later. That's what loans are for. That's what the role that they serve. And the reason we focus on debt and not equity is that climate is fundamentally a physical challenge at its core. It is moving real things with real people in the real world, atoms and molecules. Financing software development on equity is great. Equity is a great tool for software because software can get to a point where you have incremental revenue with no incremental costs. Physical assets, the real world, very different. Incremental revenue needs incremental costs. And so that's what we're here for. Just curious if anyone has gone to their local bank, community bank, or credit union to talk about loans or loan rates for biochar projects. Show of hands. Yeah? North of 15%? No, great. So we typically see 15 to 25% is what our clients say they heard from their banks with high loan-to-value ratios and other stuff. We're here to say you can get started at a much lower cost of capital, and that's meaningful. So that's great to hear. All right. Using. The verb here is key, using. So We are using what are called program-related investments. This is something that's been a part of the tax code for decades. Giant foundations lobbied successfully for it in the 60s. And it is a mechanism by which charitable, already tax-advantaged capital can be made into all sorts of different kinds of investments. We are using that kind of capital for small-scale climate project finance loans. So, but it's a little funky. You know, the reason it's a little funky is that this is not a clearly defined and heavily regulated industry. This is a lot of attorneys that assess facts and circumstances in any given case. And so that's where we start. We, in an engagement, work with you to figure out what is your story, what are you doing, what's happening here, and how can we put those facts and circumstances together to access this particular capital tool. All right. Lastly, donor-advised funds. Raise your hand if you've heard this term before in any capacity. Cool, yeah, that's about right, maybe 10, 15% for those on audio. Donor-advised funds are a mechanism that allows for streamlined charitable tax deductions. What makes it streamlined is you can get the deduction for the donation without having to decide where that cash is going. What that also means is that a lot of cash goes into DAFs and not a lot of cash comes out. So the biggest 501c3s in the world by assets under management are wholly owned by Schwab and Fidelity because they offer a streamlined DAF administration service for their clients, which is great. That's like a great service, super efficient. We're here to say that we find a lot of instances where people have capital tools that they can access they're just not necessarily aware of. So maybe I'll say the most common thing we hear is, oh, you can't do that. That's not how DAFs work, or that's not possible. And what I'll say is that there's a big difference between what an organization won't do and what the IRS says you can't do. And so that's where we are. All right, so CARBA, local darling, probably familiar to many here. They are putting on-site reactors at a waste management landfill just not too far south of here in Burnsville. Microsoft's buying the credits. They thought they had some Department of Energy financing that got a little complicated. We syndicated a project finance loan for them, $2.1 million, doesn't have to be big. Most of our stuff is sub 10. And the point is not that this is going to be their forever financing solution, because they're talking to the Minnesota Green Bank, they're talking to other banks. The point is that this is the financing that gets them started. And that's really our goal, is get more smaller projects started faster. There's such a tangibility to climate projects, to climate impact, that in this room is felt and believed and seen and understood, and yet for policymakers, for buyers, for customers, for so many others, they have to see it before they believe it. They have to see it before they understand it or can want more of it. And so that's our theory of change, is let's get more change out there so that more people can see it and more people want it. The last thing I'll say about the syndicate, it was, and that means like the group of people that came together. It was not just one party, there were a dozen-ish. And that ranged from people who were here locally in Minnesota who liked the idea of cool climate work happening in Minnesota. It included a local private foundation that wanted to support this sort of technology. It included one of CARBA's angel investors who had made an early equity investment and had never thought about using his DAF for this kind of financing, but CARBA said in one of their investor updates, we're working with Structure Climate to put together project financing using DAFs. And that angel investor said, oh, like, that's really cool. I didn't know I could do that, but I would love to support this if I can. So there is capital out there. There are networks out there. We're here to make it possible. All right. Last slide here, and then we'd love to get into questions. So what do? We talked about direct, significant public benefit. If you're doing something in biochar, you're probably achieving that direct, significant public benefit. If it's entirely a software play, that's hard for us. If it's entirely like a research or R&D play, that's hard for us. That still leaves a lot of space for engagement. So again, we're not particular about impact or registry or methodology or duration or any of that stuff. We're saying if you're doing something that works within pyrolysis and you have a buyer that wants to buy your product, your energy, your services, et cetera, we're happy to talk. Because this is tax related, there are some compliance red lines. Nothing that we've ever seen a problem with, and it's a little funky, like you can't use your project financing dollars to lobby in front of Congress. So like, okay, promise not to lobby in front of Congress with the project financing dollars that you get, right? So there are ways that this can be abused, and a lot of the projects where this can be applied, it's just lots of opportunity. We work with nonprofit partners who maintain expenditure responsibility. One other reason we do this in loans is so that there's a clear start and end date for when there are additional compliance reporting requirements, but it's really pretty straightforward. It's just show us what you're using the funds for. You said you needed it for trucks and inputs and maintenance and so on. Like, show that that's what happened, and that's it. And then raising, the probably second most common thing we hear is, I don't really have that kind of network, or I don't know about that, or, and again, what we're here to say is there's probably more out there than you know. You don't have to know all the details about how this works. That's what we are for. What we don't have, though, is we don't have the relationships that you have with the people that know you, with the stakeholders that want to see you succeed. We can't replicate that, and we can't turn that trust into dollars. We can't turn that trust into our dollars. What we can is turn their trust in you, in their dollars, into projects that are meaningful to you in a way that more conventional banks can come in behind and replicate. So again, it's not a forever solution, it's a let's get started solution. All right, if you'll be at New York Climate Week, would love to see anyone there. We'll be doing a soft launch for Next Mission Climate, a nonprofit to get more technical and mission-driven vet talent engaged in climate. Lastly, I'll say that that is a bumper for bowling. Raise your hand if you have kids. Lots of us, probably, sure, okay. Bumpers are great for kids as they learn to bowl, and there are still some kids that even with bumpers, you don't want them on the bowling alley. And if you know what you're doing and you're a great bowler, then bumpers are not in your way, you know? And that's what we are. We are there to guide you to the successful outcome that you want to achieve. We are not a perfect solution for everything. We don't solve every problem. But our goal is to be to focus on the stuff that you don't have to reinvent the wheel on, so that you can spend your hard-earned time and effort and so on inventing the new stuff that you're doing and figuring out the rest of those new business models. So that's all I have, and would love to open it up for questions.
So for questions, we need to, or I can help repeat the questions, summarize the questions as needed to make sure they're captured in the audio for the recording. But yeah, please feel free to ask questions, and then we can take them for the next 10 minutes or so. Yes.
Could you tell us what the average duration of your loans are?
Yeah, so average duration of the loans. Great question. There's a ton of flexibility, and that's often a challenge. What we like to say is, imagine you could get $5 million for 5 years at 5%. Where does that seem like too much, and where does that seem like not enough? Based on other conversations with projects like this, I would guess that 5 million is often probably more than you need, but that flexibility and timing is key. So whether it's 5 years or 6 years, that's, as the one was with Carba, could be 10 years. You know, the whole point is that there needs to be a path to repayment, a path to preserving the charitable capital. And then within that, we have a lot of flexibility.
How about a range of where your financing rates are?
Yeah, so single mid digits, you know, 4 to 6% kind of stuff. We, again, can do a lot of different things. The balance that we try to strike is making it low enough and flexible enough to give the projects that, you know, time and capacity to execute the complex stuff that they're doing, but not making it so low that it's a wasted part of your credit history. So, you know, we could technically do a bunch of 100-year loans at 0% that, like, no bank is going to look at that and be like, oh yeah, I'd like to give you a little more of that. But, you know, 6 years, 6%, 5 years, 5%, like, another bank is going to look at that and say, oh, like, that's a screaming deal, but, like, yeah, I can see how you spent it on this, you did this project, you got the cash flows, now your same, you know, customer wants to do 10x of what they did, like, that's great. So, talk with us. You know, we first start with kind of where the buyer is and what they're buying.
Are loans collateralized, and then in the case of a biochar manufacturer, is typically collateralized on equipment or land?
Question was, are loans collateralized, and if so, on what? Which is to say, is something put up against the loan, the land, the equipment, so on? Short answer is no. The slightly longer answer is they can be, and if that's something that creates a meaningful transaction history for future lenders to show that you had assets that you collateralized, whether that was your equipment or your receivables or so on, no. One of the things that we have to show in this kind of financing is that the rates are quote unquote below market. And so interest rates are the major driver there, but unsecured loans, high loan to value, low debt service coverage ratio, like there are lots of different areas that we can build the case for below market rates. Yep.
It seems like these DAO funds were originally created to kind of allow high net worth or 501c3 groups to deploy their capital and actually see effective change versus, say, NGOs that might have used dollars or other things. What I'm seeing in this market, though, is that you may not be collateralized, but that there are actually terms within the loans that require you to do certain things to make sure you may be complying with SDGs or something like that. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because it's kind of a double-edged sword. You get beneficial low interest rates, you get favorable terms, but if you're not doing these other things, these capital, this source of capital, they may not want to deploy it to you because they're trying to put that money to good use.
I'm going to summarize that to say, are there sometimes other covenants or requirements on the loans when using capital from DAFs? Things like sustainable development goals or other reporting or so on. That fair? Yeah. All right, so the short answer is no. The, again, slightly longer answer is that a lot of that stuff comes up through, you know, really well-intentioned people trying to serve donors and help them have an impact and get, you know, that sort of capital out there, capital P philanthropy, capital F foundations, a lot of that stuff. And so they'll bring in, you know, data requirements or impact requirements or private capital activation requirements. Our clients are the project developers, the people that are doing the work. And so one way to look at what we do is that it's almost like we put out a grant program that you are like perfectly tailored to apply to, and you're the only applicant for, and it's grant dollars coming from people that already know you. Again, we don't, like, we're not your network, we're not the, like, we don't know what you're doing, we're not in the community where that is. We're here to say this is a tool that can allow for a lot more projects at a much smaller scale to happen in a way that can pull forward the commercial maturity. So if your network or your community or the donors say, we like this project because it's in an opportunity zone, or we want to do this because it aligns with how we, want to see change in the world, like that's totally up to them. We are not prescriptive in what has to be there. The areas that we are prescriptive are, again, like significant direct public benefit and a path to preservation on the capital in a way that is compliant.
Your fee structure, general model, how does that work upfront? Is it as a success?
Yeah, question was on a fee structure in general. So it's a fixed fee assessment up front to say, let's look at what you're doing and see, what within this would be possible and what the best argument to construct is for this kind of financing. And our goal there is to get you to the point where you can then execute it yourself. We can point you to different nonprofit partners that can administer that. If you want us to manage that process with your, the partners and donors and so on, then we price out basically another flat fee, but based on the complexity, number of moving pieces, and so on. We are not broker dealers. These are not securities. We're not, registered investment advisors. This is a funding pathway that is open to many more people, and specifically within climate, than know about it. But if you go through the assessment and figure out that a 4% loan is going to be great, at the end of that, you might decide not to do it for other reasons completely separate from us. So we start with the assessment and then can go from there. In the way back. No, way more back. Sorry. Way your backer. Is there a requirement for hours on equipment? Nope. There needs to be a path to repayment. So let me just like.
What I'm saying is like hours on equipment, right? Like is it commercially available equipment, or is it a development project that you're building the hardware? Are you willing to finance that type of project?
Yes, and those earliest stages are where this tool is often the most applicable. Whether that's the very first thing that gets the project moving, or maybe you've lined up and assembled a beautiful looking capital stack with a bunch of other providers, and all of a sudden your local transmission utility says, oh, sorry, we actually need you to run a line 500 meters from here to there. It's going to be $6 million. And like, what do? This is again a flexible capital tool that can get more projects going faster. So hours of equipment, or has construction started, or who's your EPC, or like we'll learn about all that, and we'll make sure that what you're doing is compliant within what has to be done, but there are no prescriptions like that. All right, now in the way back. Question I heard there, and I'm sorry, Uncle Sam took some of my hearing. For product development versus inventory versus production equipment, stuff like that. This is probably the area that we like to be clearest on, where look at debt versus look at equity. So I would offer just a couple of things without knowing about the specifics of what you're doing generally. I would say think about equity where what it is funding is something that will be used everywhere. So your talent, your tech, your science, your, website, whatever, your software. Like if there's an element of what the equity capital can fund that is used, again, everywhere, that's great. That's a great tool for equity. If there is something where there's a non-zero marginal cost at scale, moving trucks, lifting things that are heavy, setting down things that are heavy, pouring concrete, any kind of process like that, then debt is going to be a much better tool for that. And the reason is that, it's a whole host of reasons, but basically like physical assets will have a maximum amount of cash flows that they can produce before they just away. And so you're not going to get the returns that you do with equity. But because you can secure them, like some of the questions I've asked about, you can just be at a different part on the risk return curve. So that's a whole lot of stuff to say. If you are super early and you're trying to find a customer and don't have that yet, that's probably not a good fit, probably too early for us. Or if you have a customer but they cover some small fraction of the costs you think you need, also again not a good fit. And then yeah, I would say that still leaves a lot of space. We are here for the up-and-comers. So no, this does not need to be established. What you do need is a customer, and your customer needs to, like, we start our diligence looking at your customer. So in the case of Carba, ooh, nice. All right, so they're putting reactors on site at Waste Management. And I'm not going to tell Waste Management anything about equipment going on their site that they're not going to know for themselves. And they have no reason to listen to me. Like, I'm not here for that. Just like, if you're selling a service or product to a municipality, they're going to have a way, like they're going to assess that and kick the tires. We like to say domain expert industries, which is to say that there's something that the buyer can assess for themselves as to whether or not it is sufficient for their purposes. So if they're buying electricity, you can measure electricity. If they're buying feedstock for cement, you can measure, I don't know, ash content and moisture levels. And I don't know, I'm not here to get into those kinds of technicals. I'm here to say if you have a buyer that wants to buy your stuff and you're working in climate, you probably have costs now before you can get revenues later. And the more physically intense the industry, the longer the invoicing cycles and payment terms, and just the more they manage their cash flows really strictly for all sorts of understandable reasons. We're here to say, like, take the cash flow challenges out of it. This is a tool that can do that, so that you can focus on the more relevant, real, applicable challenges to what is uniquely hard and what you're doing with your customers.
Okay, I think we'll wrap it up unless there's one more quick question.
Are there any states that you're not working with? Are you working with businesses in
Any states that we're not working with? No. And this can be, the tax advantage accrues most heavily to the U.S. based on this mechanism that we're working with now. The impact can happen anywhere in the world. So Africa, South America, like lots of different places. And that's part of the facts and circumstances that we assemble when assessing. And then, depending on the state and depending on the mechanism, that will set the selection of the nonprofit partners that we work through to administer.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt.